Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. Although I'm not looking extremely glamorous today, but we're having a day of it. It's really windy, snowy, rainy, all of the things here in New York. So I'm just in my comfies. We're doing a bit of recording from home today. So hope you're all warm wherever you are. And today's episode is a tough one. We're talking about child bereavement. So let's take it away. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. Not looking very glam today, but whatever, we're going with it. It's cold here in New York, so I am bundled up. But on today's episode, I'm very excited because we have a fellow fish from the other side of the pond, from the UK. We have John Adams, and he is the president of the NAFD, which, for anybody who doesn't know that, over here is the National Association of Funeral Directors in the UK. John, welcome.
Hello to you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, we were just saying how it has been. Well, it feels like it was ages ago actually that we met in Baltimore, and I did laugh because I think you've just recently been on undertaking the podcast for a second time.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, last Saturday I went on there.
Yeah, you recorded with them, with the Fun Boys in Baltimore, and I did hear mention of the Lord Solihull.
Lord Solihull. Adam Jinder strikes again. That's correct.
That still cracks me up to this day. That reservation, that absolutely still cracks me up.
It was so. Yeah, he was just hilarious. I could not believe what happened, but yeah, good times. And
he can pull it off. So we might actually get Adam on, because I'm sure all the listeners are like, "What is this? We want to know."
Get him on. He'd love it as well.
I think we have to get him on to reenact the reservation and all that happened. But I am very excited to chat to you today. We're not going to sort of bullshit around here, and we're going to get straight to it, because you're obviously the president of the National Association of Funeral Directors in the UK, but you've got a huge petition going right now. You've been all over sort of the news. You've been all over LinkedIn. You've been traveling around. This is obviously a big thing for you. I know we talked about it at the NFDA back in Baltimore. You spoke about length, about your own personal experience and everything. So I'd love to share the story with my listeners. Take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer. So the petition started when I was actually in Baltimore with you. It went live, and so we've just gone over the halfway point in time, and we've just hit 7,500 signatures. We need 10,000 by April the 10th. So this petition is to add content on death, dying, and bereavement into the national curriculum. And the key part of this, Jennifer, is that it's taught as a compulsory measure. On average, in the UK, 111 children will lose a parent every single day. That's every 22 minutes a parent dies. That's not including siblings, uncles, aunties, grandparents, and even pets. So the idea is that we have age-appropriate lessons and sessions taught to people in school, and that's going to benefit the person that loses a parent or loses a loved one. It's going to help their friends in the classroom have an understanding what that person's going through, try and instill some compassion and empathy all over the UK. It will help the teachers. There are concerns, will teachers have time for this? But my view is, well, actually, this will create a more positive, closer classroom. And then the outcome is a more positive society, a more grateful society, and understanding. And these tools as well that are taught at a young age, these will then see you through to adult life. And if you don't have a loss in your life, which is very, very unlikely, if you pass away suddenly and your parents are still alive, again, very unlikely that you go through your life without a close loss. But you'll have an understanding on knowing how to talk to people who are going through a loss, and that's just a kinder society. So who doesn't want to have that? Is my question.
And it's interesting because, and I actually spoke with some of the media back home in Ireland about this. I think it's about 2 years ago now, about this idea of introducing sort of bereavement and the idea of talking to children, and should the onus be on teachers and all of that. And we'll get into that, but like, just from my own even personal experience, like when you're growing up, even if and I've been very lucky, as my parents, my brother, yeah, everyone still, but like our goldfish died, like
Mm.
small things like that. Our goldfish died, a pet died, but equally, and actually I think in some ways somewhat more importantly, is it's in their movies, it's in
Yeah,
their cartoons. I remember being devastated when Mufasa died in The Lion King. I remember being devastated when
yeah,
Bambi's mum died. And and Pixar and Disney, I have to say, and I've done a bit of research on this because I actually wanted to speak at the child bereavement there was a convention over here, because it's children especially. And unfortunately, I've been doing quite a lot of memorials lately for what I still consider children, teenagers,
yeah,
usually death due to suicide and stuff like that. And it's so important to gather all those kids in a room and for them to grieve and experience that. And
yeah,
I just think it's in such popular culture. I mean, Pixar have dealt with that Coco
yeah.
movie that dealt with it, and whether it's dealing with it on a spiritual level, or whether it's dealing with it, um, as in if there's an
Practical.
afterlife. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's
or just
creating a
or just
conversation.
practical. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
it, and that's what I've been saying as well. That regardless of your religion or your culture, again, some cultures and religions have very sort of strict processes in place which can help with loss. But before that, on that initial loss, the feelings and emotions are going to be there regardless of what you believe in, and that's all we're going to be doing. So, like you said, Lion King, when Simba loses his dad, you know, okay, pausing it there, how do we think Simba's feeling? There's levels of guilt, anger, there's sadness. He disappears, but then actually, press play again. Look what he does. He takes his dad with him, and that's what life is really.
Mm.
Back to this though, some schools in the UK are already teaching about death, dying, and bereavement in schools. It's already happening in some. The vast majority, though, the vast majority have nothing in place. And my view is, like, why should we have to rely on proactive schools and teachers? Why can't we put a net over the whole thing and give everyone an opportunity to learn about such important matters around about the feelings associated with the loss?
Now, quick question: are you with what your petition, and 7,500 is amazing, by the way. I mean, you're so close to 10,000, so hopefully you can get it over the
Thank
line.
you.
But is your proposition that teachers will be teaching the children? Will that be, because I know that can be a bit of a bone of contention, that teachers are already dealing with so much, that now is this going to be another added thing that they have to add to their
So,
repertoire?
so for me, my dream would be um, to have someone come in like I was taught at primary school about sex education. Someone
Yeah.
comes in, teaches about that, and then they disappear. That's how I would like it to be. Again, it's about funding, it's about what's possible. But the sessions are already in place. Companies like Project Eileen, Child Bereavement UK, and actually since the BBC article, so many people are coming to me now and saying, "We're doing this. I'm doing this in Bury. How can I get this across the whole United Kingdom?" So the stuff's it's already happening.
Mm.
You do need that willingness from teachers to obviously deliver it because it needs to be delivered well. That's the important thing.
Well, yeah.
Um, so the next part of the proposal will be around exactly what this is. I mean, I've got a letter from the Minister of Education on my desk here. The conversations are already happening and they are open for conversation. So we're just working now to actually detail exactly what this is going to be. That's the next stage. But as I say, my job, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not trying to
Mm.
be the one to take all this on and create lesson plans. The great work is already taking place. But as I say, it's only in some areas and at some schools. So my responsibility, I see, is to try and join it all up now, connect all the dots, and get everyone talking and ensure this happens for everyone.
And you have, I mean, this is coming from a very emotional place for you as well. I mean, you lost your mum when you were 12, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, 12 years of age. I lost
Now,
my mum.
was there any education around then, or how did you
Nothing at
deal?
all. So, to my experience then, in school, the communication was non-existent. And I keep saying, I'm not a victim. I'm not bitter by that, because that's how things were, and that was normal. But it can be so much better. Um, Counselling at that time, I remember, if you're having counselling, something's wrong with you. You're it was a bit embarrassing. So I think things have moved forward now, where
Yeah,
counselling is like it's a strength to have counselling,
yeah,
and actually it's good to go and see counsellors when things are fine.
yeah,
So that's that's moved forwards, but overall, as I say, a lot of schools still have nothing in place.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, live as an Irish person living in America, it's and even just the little journey I've been on, it's very interesting. People always sort of say to me that Irish are great at talking about death and we're great at dealing with
Mm.
death. And I actually completely disagree with that. I think we are great at funerals. I think the wake, the fact that we come
Yeah,
together as a community, even during times of COVID, we are very community based, or historically always have been. But I actually think we're not great at talking about death. It's very much, you know, how we were raised. I mean, Catholic Church had a stronghold of Ireland. So between your sexuality and death,
yeah,
those were not topics ever discussed. Going to therapy was not a thing. Men didn't cry. Like, that was the way we, even women, we kind of had to have this sort of stiffness about us. The Irish
mm,
mammy is sort of a renowned thing.
yeah,
So that's the way I was reared. But so I think it's super important to talk about these things. And just living here in the States, though, it's incredible with the amount of school shootings that are going on.
yeah, yeah.
Forget seeing Bambi and Simba. These kids over here
Mm,
are witnessing death. They're witnessing death before they're
yeah,
6 years of age. Like,
yeah.
that is mind boggling. Like,
It's
for
scary.
me, how I got into what I'm doing, I didn't have wasn't in a funeral home or anything, but for me it was friends of mine passing away in their 20s, and I was shocked at that, because to me it was, you died of disease or old age. That was what you died from. So these 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds and teenagers are now literally seeing this in front of their eyes. It's not on TV, it's fact.
So in the UK now as well, we had a huge increase in suicide here now as well. In the last week, we've looked after two gentlemen who've taken their own life, and they weren't in school, but they're teenagers. Their friends. The trauma around that. I've been thinking about it actually the last few days around this as well, with the rise of an increase in suicides. Again, I'm just putting it out there, just thinking out loud. So, um, I'll take your feedback on this as well. But I wonder as well, if and when we get this put through, when discussing about emotions and loss and seeing the pain it can cause people for loss, could that actually help in actually reducing the rate of suicides? Because they'll know, even though they're in a state where it's just, I'm sorry, I can't think about anybody else. This just needs to happen. After learning about how their parents and their family might feel, it might be a little pull to say, actually, I won't do this. I
Well,
can't do
that's
this.
that's it. I mean, and I've me and my colleagues and stuff have talked about this so much in the last month or so, because like that, I just feel it's one person after another. It's teenagers, a lot of men, their 20s, 30s, and 40s and stuff. And it feels like a different kind of pandemic, to be honest. That's honestly how I feel. And it's the tragedy of mental health is that you can never ever assume or understand what that person was going through, and will never ever get answers. And that's the difficulty of those who are left behind, is that they never do get those answers. And I'm actually super excited, because I am going to be having a doctor who is, I never even heard of this term before I'd met her, a suicidologist. So I'm going to be getting her on the show soon as well. And she obviously is educated in all things, because I'm fascinated by the human brain and sort of psychology, and how we're all so different, that there is no one blanket cure all. But like you said, if it maybe at an early stage we're at least engaging in these conversations with these kids, and especially I feel for men. Again, maybe it's just coming from Ireland, but I remember the first time I saw my dad cry. He was in his 40s after his brother died. I mean, it's so unusual. Usually it's kind of, and the British, the stiff upper lip, it's, we're kind of taught not to have these emotions. So I think for kids just to be allowed to experience that, and if it's, God, I mean, if it's a tragedy like a shooting or a suicide of a class member, that they see the permanence of it. Like, and I know this is kind of doesn't fit all, but suicide is a permanent answer to a temporary problem. And most people who've, and again, not most, because again, mental health, it's so unique to everybody, but a lot of people who have suffered depression, even I've had little bouts myself. I spoke about it with Barbara Chemist of Cana before, about, and funeral directors and stuff. Everybody experiences low points. But most people will say that while they thought they couldn't go on anymore, or however dark it got, years later, they're like, I'm so glad I just kept going, because now my life, I'm the happiest I've ever been, or whatever it might be. And some people are still struggling, and maybe always will and stuff, but it's a permanent solution. And I wish more of these kids would realize that, I think.
And on that, it's easier to build young people than repair and try and
Older.
fix older
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And that's the key. It's education at a younger age. So,
Yeah.
and again, trying to instill compassion and empathy into younger people.
Yeah.
Not only will it have benefits on what you're saying here, but on the, growing up to realise that having a Bugatti is not actually,
Yeah.
it's nice, but it's not actually a priority in life. It's how we treat
Yeah.
people. That's the
Yeah.
priority.
That's exactly it. And it's even, even for me, and it's small things, but I'm very honored. Actually, I'm speaking at the Irish consulate here in New York next week on a panel of quote unquote extraordinary women,
Amazing.
who are sort of challenging stereotypically male roles. And while that's a great honor, absolutely, like, again, I feel like we just have to take, and my TEDx talk was even about this, we
Mm.
just have to take judgment away from
Yeah,
situations. Like, for example, a child who maybe their goldfish died and he's crying, mom or dad might say, oh, for God's sake, it's only a goldfish, come on, we'll bury him in the backyard. Maybe having that facility in school where he can actually cry and can let his feelings out.
yeah, yeah,
I know for me, as a 40-year-old woman, I'm expected to have had kids and a husband, and kind of the certain expectations, and
yeah.
maybe that is
It's
something.
judgmental. It's
It's
judgmental, isn't it?
exactly, it's
Yeah,
people putting their own judgment and their own idea of what the perfect life should be. I
yeah,
mean, I'm the happiest I ever am. And
yeah,
I also know some people with kids and
yeah,
spouses
yeah,
who, like, that's why. But
yeah,
it's putting these judgments on people, like, oh, you're this, so you should be that. You're whatever, so you should be this. You're from this country, so you should be that. It's just really just letting people grieve in their own way as well.
yeah, yeah. And that's,
And
I have a bit of an issue actually, and I think this petition and the last couple of years, it's starting to really highlight it. And with my teaching I do as well, is all these bereavement models and cycles of grief. I find them very irritating. I think we need to just like start again almost.
yeah,
Death is unique,
it is.
emotions are unique. So, and I think that's half the problem. We have these diagrams. This is how we should be feeling. This is where you could be at. Well, actually, no. Obviously you need something. You need some foundations down to try and help people. But it's about communication and people knowing actually today you had a little laugh. That's also fine. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Don't punish yourself for that. So we
yeah.
just need to just almost, I think, start again with all this stuff really.
It's and it's, what, it's, you've actually touched on something that I often talk about in terms of even what I do. Because a lot of people, when I started what I do, people thought, oh, she's just throwing a party, and she's making light of a situation and dancing on people's graves and that sort of thing. And I'm like, that's absolutely not what I'm trying to do at all. And I do think as a society, we do sort of need a blueprint. And I think that's why these grief models, and I think that's why they all sort of work for us, because we're like, oh, I'm in denial now. Okay, there's a comfort to that. And I actually firmly believe in the ritual of a funeral. What I just believe is that we're all completely unique and different, and not everyone wants to go to a Catholic church or go to a funeral. Some people want to have it by the beach, some people want to have it in a hotel room, some people, everyone, we're all just completely different. That's what I believe. It's not that I'm trying to get rid of the funeral. I actually think the funeral is a super important part of your grief process. And I think exactly that. It gives people a blueprint of, okay, this is what they're having. They're having a service for Sarah, will say. They're having a service for Sarah. Okay, I can show up and I can, this is how I show my support. We as a society do sort of need parameters
Yeah.
to guide us, I
Well,
think,
guidance. We need guidance, but
but it's
actually,
not boxing us in. It's
yeah,
not,
yeah, and
shouldn't be boxed in.
that's what, again, you know, what we do here, and what I pride myself on is about how we empower people. And just on the BBC, that sounds great, but it's actually how you action that.
Yeah.
And actually, it's highlights to me the funeral service um, is that platform to say goodbye to someone. But actually, there's lots of things we can do along the way as well, which form part of that process of letting go and
Yeah.
allowing people to move forward in the most positive way.
Yeah.
Things like allowing families and telling families it's okay if they want to be the ones to close the coffin.
Yeah.
We'd be there to guide them again.
Yeah.
Um, the Leith family that are on the BBC with me, we have a little scanning machine here which takes fingerprints of the deceased. I said, "Do you want to help me do that?" Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And we actually then ended up taking all their fingerprints, and all those fingerprints now are on the headstone of all the family.
Oh,
But they were part of that process. We were in
yeah.
there, and they were giggling, and it was just so
Yeah.
special. And that's
Yeah.
how it can be.
Yeah.
A mother who lost her son to suicide, she came in here desperate, um, fear factor, totally out of her depth, had no control, and it was about giving her control and telling her that her son is still hers, and now offering her things to make her know that her son is hers. So she came to our mortuary. We changed the environment in the mortuary. I showed her a mortuary first as a mortuary, the sounds of the refrigeration units on. Took her back down to the reception, had a cup of tea, and then during that time, myself and my colleague Darren, we put the candles on, turned off the sound of the refrigeration, put on their favourite soundtrack. It was Queen, played just quietly in the background, take away the silence. And she came back up, and she was really unsure, really, really fearful about what to expect. And her son's taken his own life, so just the actual overwhelming feeling of that. But then going up there, and she was part of it all. Like putting the socks on was so special, and it was just so beautiful, and that actually is as important as the funeral service as well. But again, it's about the industry listening to their clients to ensure that the family have everything they need, and that can be really really simple or really really detailed and personal. The key thing is I'm always thinking where will we be tomorrow and where will we be in 5 years' time. And that's what our responsibility is to ensure that they have everything they need to ensure they move forward in the right way.
And that's so refreshing to hear, because it's not many that say that, because it's one thing I'm always pushing, or saying, pushing by saying, is that it's about meeting families where they're at. It's not about where you want your casket sales to be, our coffin sales, or it's not what you think it should
But,
happen.
casket sales, I'm aware that's culture in the culture of the UK. It's different to America. I'm aware of that, but my view is if you make it exactly what they want, and like for cremation for us, I will suggest a basic coffin, because I think what's required. But surely, if you're looking after the family to the highest of standards, over time you're going to serve more people due to the standards you offer, and that actually it's genuine care and it's just about them.
Yeah. Well, it should be. It absolutely should be like that, John. But
Mm.
there is, I know some of my families themselves have called me and are horrified by certain car salesman attitudes that they kind of get. And look,
Okay.
that's the unfortunate part, is there are those, like every industry, and there's the good and the
Mm.
bad, and so unfortunately sometimes the bad stories get out there, like during COVID here, the bodies were sort of racking up, and And then there was the famous case of the woman who was, or the two women who were selling body parts just there recently. I mean, those are the ones that make the news, unfortunately, and then they're the ones that taint the rest of the industry. Whereas, like the things that, like what you're doing with trying to get this bereavement care into curriculum in the UK, don't make the news as much, and that can be very frustrating, I find.
But for me now, as we move forwards, what really like to do is highlight the special work, the sector in the US, the UK, all over Europe. What we do, I think we undervalue ourselves in this industry. We undervalue the level we work at. People in their darkest time come to us, and we have to be reactive because they're walking through the doors at their darkest time, and we have to look after them and help them. And the vast majority of funeral homes in the United Kingdom that I know are doing amazing work, but it's all off the radar. I've said this before, the key workers, the clapping on the doorsteps, the key workers, NHS staff. I was there clapping as well, rightly so. But actually, it appears that the funeral industry is not part of that category, and
No,
we really should be. We really should be.
100%, yeah.
And I believe that actually, once we get into that category, coffin sales doesn't become the priority because we know our worth and we know what we're
Yeah,
doing it for.
absolutely.
So
It
I
should.
think it will come back round. I think it will come back round where again we just remember how special the role is.
Well, that's it. And I think it absolutely will come back around. And I think it has to come back around, John, because there's so many other innovators now who have had poor experiences, who have then innovated within the industry or whatever it might be. So the direct cremations, and all of these other players that are coming into the field. Like I've said it, my good friend Larry, we had, I think, a whole podcast about it where, it nearly shouldn't be about putting money on each item. It should be about a consultancy fee, valuing your job. The job of a funeral director is incredible, and it is exactly like a nurse and a doctor. You're with people when they need it the most. So stop devaluing yourself and value the service you're giving. Or and I think if you're nearly looking at it like commodity, like, oh, money on this, money on that, then you're completely devaluing, and you're yeah, it's just not going to work. But so I do think it will evolve to that for sure.
Good,
I think
yeah.
it
Well,
has to for survival.
it needs us all though to sort of speak out and
Mhm.
actually remind people how special the role
Yeah.
is,
Oh,
and already in our society is the work we do. But again, though, like with the bereavement awareness stuff, it's all under the radar. We don't discuss that. Well, actually, it's time that we should discuss it because actually the results will be a lot more positive.
yeah, I completely agree, 100%. Well, listen, amazing to talk to you, as always, and thank you so much for sharing. Tell us the petition. I know obviously I'm based in New York and then from Ireland. Can Irish people vote, or is it
So
just
it's
UK?
it's UK. It's
Okay.
UK.
Well, we'll
Um,
share the link anyway, and sure we'll see
yeah,
if we can.
that'd be fantastic. It's on the NAFD website.
Great.
You'll see it all over social media now. And if you just Google add content on death, dying, and grieving international curriculum, it should pop up. And
Perfect.
it'd be fantastic if you can support it. I know
Yeah.
your listeners are going to get behind it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we wish you the absolute best of luck with it. You've only got another 2,500. That's nothing. You
I
should be
know.
absolutely
Well, I'm pleased.
good.
It's been an interesting time. It's learning about the psychology of how people actually engage with it as well. So, but no,
Absolutely. All
I'm really grateful to everyone getting behind it. So thank
good,
you.
good. There's always going to be naysayers out there, but you just have to keep plowing on through.
I
So,
like those. I want to meet more of those. So yeah,
love a challenge.
yeah, I do. So
All right. Well, thank you so much, John.
yeah,
And sure, we'll watch this space and maybe we'll get you back on when it's been approved and see
that'd
what
be
your
great.
next steps are.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, John.
Thanks so much.
So, what did you think of today's episode? Hopefully, it didn't affect too many of you too harshly. Definitely, if you're in the UK, check out the petition, see if you're interested in signing it or not. And we'd love to hear from you on this and any other topics that we talk on the Glam Reaper podcast. Shoot us an email, glamreaperpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll talk to you soon.